Good morning, Encounter Church. We are so glad to see you here this morning. We are about to sing some praise and worship unto our God. We would love if you would stand and join us. People come together, strangest neighbors, our blood is one. Children of generations, of every nation, of kingdom come. So don't let your heart be troubled. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. Fix your eyes on this one truth. God is madly in love with you. So take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. Oh.
His name is Jesus.
'cause you are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle work, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you.
You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Even when I don't see it, you work. Even when I don't feel it, you work it. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. And even when I don't see it, you work it. Even when I don't feel it, you work it. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. And even when I don't see it, you work it. Even when I don't feel it, you work it. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop. Come on, church.
Even when I don't see
unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Your love has called my name. And I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I am be seated.
Good morning. Welcome to Encounter Church. I'm so glad you are here today. My name is Chris Causey. I'm the lead pastor. And I want to tell you a story that started in September of 1983, specifically on the morning of the 26th. It involved this man. We'll just call him Stan. His full name is Stanislav Petrov. If I butchered it, I apologize. I will definitely butcher the next thing, which is this, because as he's sitting at his desk, this is what begins to flash on his monitor, or at least the readout of a 1983 monitor. This is the words, when translated, would have caused an incredible alarm, and it's this moment that most of us have never even heard of that could be one of the most monumental moments in world history. You see, in Russian, this is what it was saying: missile strike. In the span of a couple minutes, Stan, whose responsibility was to monitor for U.S. nuclear missile launches, had all of a sudden, on a sleepy morning, noticed not just one, his system was not saying just 2 or 3 or 4, but 5 nuclear warheads had been detected launching from the U.S., headed to Russia. And he's sitting there and he freezes because he realizes what is happening on his screen is about to change the world. And fortunately for you and I, he doesn't do what he's supposed to do, which is immediately to pick up the phone and to alert his superiors so that the Russian leader can open the nuclear football and respond. At least with 5, if not more, nuclear launches of their own to neutralize what appears to be a preemptive strike from the U.S. by Ronald Reagan. This is terrifying. But as he's sitting there, staring at the screen, sirens are going off, he has a hunch that maybe he needs to slow the situation down and not respond, not react. And he sits there and he doesn't call his superior. And a few minutes later, when a missile should have landed in Russia, it doesn't. It had been a false alarm. The computer had glitched. And the world did not end. And it sounds like a scene from a movie, but it wasn't. It was part of declassified reports that have leaked out since the fall of the USSR and since decades have passed, when individuals who were sitting there, who were in the moment, have finally felt free to discuss it. I mean, it's terrifying. This man stopped a nuclear war and probably saved the world. Because there's not too many scenarios where nuclear missiles start to launch from all around the globe and we're all okay. I'm pretty sure the cockroaches are the only ones who win in those kind of scenarios. And yet, I would argue that what Stan does in that moment is actually a perfect picture of what we can do in some of our tense moments. You see, there's kind of a narrative arc, if I'm going to be a little bit of kind of transparent with how I want us to move through the fall in the message series. This past month in August, we were having this discussion around the weight of the words and the power of our words. Next week, I'm kicking off a brand new series. And then in October, we're coming with a different series. And all of these series combined are meant, I think, to help us move forward into new areas of our lives and see our relationships transformed. And for us to be able to look back over 2023 and say, man, I started to make better decisions and I have a lot fewer regrets. Because I don't know about you, I sometimes get a little overwhelmed when I look at my regret counter and the dashboard on that thing keeps growing. And so these three series, this movement is a part of us as a people being able to move into our lives with better decisions and fewer regrets. And so this in some ways is a bridge. I want to kind of teach you a skill set that Stan actually illustrated for us, but did not originate with him. It actually really crystal clearly originated with James, the brother of Jesus, who, as in the aftermath of his brother's death, was trying to process what had played out. Because if you step into James's shoes, which you can do if you have a sibling, the guy that you grew up with, the guy that you grew up around, one day comes out at 30 years old and announces to everyone that he is a religious teacher, he is a miracle worker, and oh, by the way, he's God. I mean, imagine Thanksgiving this year, your sibling at the table says, I have an announcement to make, I'm God. How does that probably land? It probably lands with some glances and then someone excusing themselves to the restroom to call someone to come and pick them up. Right? And this is essentially what happens to James. Jesus, who he had known, who he had learned carpentry skills with, who he'd seen kind of in childhood and into adulthood, and then all of a sudden, Jesus becomes a traveling rabbi, and James, which is very clear from the scriptural text, does not believe that Jesus is God. So his brother is crucified, his mom watches it from a distance, and then in the aftermath, we find out from historical accounts that James meets Jesus resurrected. And it transforms his life. Which to me, oftentimes, when we're thinking about faith and we're thinking about Christianity, we say, how do we know this stuff is even true? And, how do we know this faith versus this faith? And how do I, how does it all fit together? What I love about the practicality of the Christian faith is, what would your brother or sister have to do to convince you that they are God? I mean, because Jesus does that for James. This is what he does. Jesus convinces James, and as he's convinced me, because I'm just simple enough, if a dude can predict his death, die, and then come back from the dead, I'm with him. Right? I'm just like, I'm with you. I don't have it all figured out, but clearly you do. So I'm getting on your train, choot, choot, right? And this is exactly what James does. And James steps in to become a leader of the early church, specifically in Jerusalem, which, as Christianity continues to grow and spread around the Roman Empire, there is a parallel track of the Roman Empire, especially that part of the Roman Empire, starting to become a pressure cooker. There is a Jewish revolt in 70 AD. The Roman government comes and squashes it, destroys the temple, which was a devastating reality to hit the Jewish people. So there's this extreme kind of just blow up within the Jerusalem church and within Jerusalem as a whole. And so James writes a letter to them trying to help them navigate, which is two of the biggest challenges that they're going to face. The first, at the very beginning of the letter, is trials and struggles and challenges because they're following Jesus in a Jewish context, which means they're being persecuted. And they're being tempted to walk away from their faith. And James is saying, look, I know what it's like, but remember, My brother is not just my brother, he's my God. And he's your God too. So don't give up. And then he gets very practical with the passage that I want us to talk through today in James 1:19. He says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." He turns to a very practical but equally as powerful force in the Christian life, which is our words. Right? And that's over the month of August. That's what we talked about. That Jesus wanted it to be clear that they would know us not just by our love, but by our words too. And how we speak and how we respond, and how we react. And what James does here that's actually quite genius is it's subtle, but it's in the words. And the words he chooses and a little bit of understanding who he was as a Jewish man who'd become a Christian. He says everyone should be quick to what? To listen. What I like about the math of this, when you kind of time it out and you kind of do the little bit of an equation, when you're quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry, what you actually do in a situation is you slow it down, which is really genius. Because if you think about the moments that we oftentimes most regret, it's not because someone waved the flag and said, "Hey, let's slow this down a little bit. Let's take a breath." No, it's usually those moments where there's not a breath in between what they're saying and what you say back. Because when we speed up those conflict situations, oftentimes disaster happens. Which is why what Stan did in 1983 was genius. Instead of doing very quickly what he should have done according to kind of military protocol, which is to pick up the phone and say, "I've got 5 nuclear missiles that have been released," he slows it down and realizes that this doesn't make any sense. There must be a computer error. And James's first call is like, hey, let's change the speed. Because everything about stepping into conflict, whether it's your sibling as a teenager, or whether it's your boss as an adult, or whether it's your spouse, whether it's someone who pulls out in front of you, right? Everything about it is accelerator. It makes you want to speed it up. Somebody pulls out and you're not like I raise a hallelujah. No, you don't slow it down like that. Oftentimes we react. We raise something else, right? I mean, it's just the speed. It's like, slow it down. Be quick to listen. Slow to speak. And slow to become angry. And he's calling out this quickness around listening. Now, listening is something that I think is actually good to think about. James, because he's a Jewish man, this word would have had some weight to it in a way that isn't too far off, actually, from how we view it. And I think, let me parse it, because we have multiple words in English. So when he's saying listening, he's not saying hearing. Hearing is an ability. It's a biological function. Sound waves travel through the air, right? This is how we do it, right? So that's just modulation of sound waves. It hits your ears, and it vibrates the bones, and those nerve cells translate to your brain, and what you hear in this is how we do it, right? Like your brain takes that and turns it into a song. So you went from hearing to listening. Hearing is an ability. It's subconscious. It happens. You can't change it. It's just there. It's a biological function. But listening is a skill. You hear with your ear because it's a biological response to a stimuli. But you listen with your mind. And it's a skill that you have to develop. Because how many times, for the parents of the room, have you said to your child, listen to me? No, I know you hear me, but I don't think you're listening to me. Do not hit your brother again. Whack. I mean, how many times have you had to say that? It's because you don't step into this world doing this very well. And so listening is a skill that we have to intentionally focus on developing. And part of it is that the better we can get good at it when we're younger, the far more productive our life will be as an adult. Because I've lived long enough to realize that most people spell love L-I-S-T-E-N. Have you ever walked away from someone in a conversation and you're like, I don't know exactly what happened, but I felt seen or I felt loved? And it definitely does not happen when someone's talking and you're doing this, flipping and scrolling and responding. You can hear holding a phone in your hand, but you can't listen because it requires your mind. In fact, the Old English word for listen meant to pay attention to. So it's baked into the word listen itself. It carried the weight of our mind focusing. Now, I said that James was Jewish, and the reason this is important is because this word was an essential, central word to the Jewish faith. It still is, in fact, today. If you have friends or neighbors who are Jewish and you've ever gotten into a conversation about their religion or their religious rituals, this word still is central to the daily practice of their faith. This is the word translated Shema. Now, Shema is, when it's normally said the Shema, it's referring to a passage in Deuteronomy 6 that is referring to, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. But the reason it's called the Shema is because the word in Hebrew for hear is Shema. But here's what was fascinating about Jewish people and the way that they thought about the word listening is there wasn't a word for hearing. To listen, to Shema, there wasn't even, so the word Shema could show up and it could mean listen or it could mean obey. Like the word was interchangeable because baked into the word Shema was action, response. You're listening to understand so that you can respond. And this is actually why I think James is saying quick to listen, and he carries this heavy weight when he says it, even though he's writing it in the language of the day, which is Greek. He's a Jewish man who could not have detached in his head this idea of listening. This is a sacred thing that we do. This is a special thing we do. And to be Jewish and to respond to God in Shema, to listen to him, was to understand so that you could stand under him and obey him. So there's a weight to the word. And I think the challenge for us is oftentimes we listen to win. But when he says, as a Jewish man, this call to be quick to listen, he's referring to listening to understand the situation, not listening to win. Because if we are listening in a conflict, right, we're normally listening to figure out the weakness, or we're listening to figure out when they're going to stop so that we can interject our side, so we can win the argument, so we can stab them back with our word sword. And for him, he said, no, we listen to understand. We don't assume intent. We recognize there's ignorance. And we want to make sure that we fully stand under it and understand it. I think James understood a little bit about even something like howdy doody, right? This past week, I don't know if you saw this, but this man was driving around a town in Nebraska. He's pulled over because he has a large cow that originates from Africa, whose horns, by the way, is wider almost than the car itself. So he's pulled over because people are concerned, naturally, driving down the road, that there is a man in an old Ford car that has a custom shotgun seat for this bull who weighs so much that the car literally is tipping. And naturally, everyone who calls 911 because of howdy doody is thinking the same thing. Why in the world would he do that? Like, what was going through your mind when you decided, because this isn't a spur of the moment kind of thing. You don't retrofit an old police car with a shotgun seat for a 900-pound bull on the fly. Right? You're like, what is wrong with you? And we all kind of can get that. We say this when we're watching the news. We say this, why in the world would they say that? Are they ignorant or something? Right? We find ourselves, not just in our home or with our spouse or our kids or coworkers, we scream this at our news channel of hatred, right? Because I'm convinced that most Americans have a channel they like and then a news channel they hate. And they periodically watch them both. They watch one to go, yes, and they watch one to yell at. And they say, why in the world would they say that? Why in the world would they think that? And yet, one of my mentors that was really helpful for me wrapping my head around this, that unlocked for me this ability to kind of lean into James's practice, was that everything everyone does makes perfect sense to them. So, you go back to Howdy Doody. The owner of Howdy Doody, when he's pulled over, the cop is asking, what in the world are you doing, sir? And the guy responds, oh, Howdy Doody is a prized bull. And he's frequently invited to rodeos. He's invited to parades and fairs and to farm shows, and people want to see him because he's extraordinary. And I realized, man, I don't have to have a tractor or a trailer or a big truck. I could just get this old Ford police car and cut out half the side and retrofit a bull seat into it. It saved me money, and it helps me get around to get Howdy Doody to the places that make me money. Anyone else driving down the street is not seeing all of that. But when he starts talking, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, I still think it's crazy, but I see why you don't think it's crazy. Because everything everyone does, everything everyone says, everything that they think makes perfect sense to them. It may not make perfect sense to you. But when James is calling us to step into these situations, he wants us to be aware of a danger that we don't even realize we step in, which is ignorance. We fill in the gap. And instead of saying, oh, I'm ignorant of something around this situation, I'm ignorant about something in this conflict, instead we assume intent. Right? Well, they're just being selfish. They're just being closed-minded. They're just being ridiculous. They're just evil. And instead of seeing our own ignorance, we see intent coming from them, and we escalate. We speed it up because we've been injured. They said something that hurt us. But when you slow down, when you're quick to listen, you're quick, your mind is focused on understanding, not winning, then it starts to actually change the dynamics of what's playing out in the conflict. It actually causes you to slow down what you're going to say. Because I've been on the other side a lot of times of being really frustrated with someone and being like, why did they do that? Or what were they thinking? And then you sit down and you're like, oh my goodness, I had no clue. I didn't realize when I said that offended you. I didn't realize that I didn't do that when you thought I was supposed to. Like, a lot of times, it's just been a misunderstanding. Doesn't mean sometimes we don't get into situations, but it just far more than not, if we were quick to listen and slow to speak, it would actually change the type of conversation we would have. And we would all actually probably get what we want. We would get closer to resolving the conflict and moving forward. Because most of us, maybe some of us enjoy it, but most of us don't like going to bed with a person beside us or the person on the other end of the phone really mad and angry. I mean, I was traveling a few weeks ago, and I painfully got to watch this because the lady in the seat beside me had decided that the 30-minute boarding time that she had should be dealt best effectively to deal with the conflict that she had the night before when she'd had a little bit to drink with, her ride or die, which was the phrase she kept using in the course of the conversation. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just trying to work. And I wanted to FaceTime my wife and my kids, but I couldn't because I realized this woman was going to broadcast through my FaceTime, and I did not need that happening. And so I'm just sitting there stuck with her for 30 minutes, and she's just like, well, you just don't understand. Like, why would you say that? I mean, like, no joke. It got to the point where it was so funny, where at one point I was like, am I being filmed? Because she is being so ridiculous. She is like yelling at him and like, you're an idiot and you don't get this and da-da-da-da-da. And she's playing a game on her phone while she's talking to him. I'm like, I don't understand. If this is so upsetting, why are you playing Mahjong or whatever it is that you're currently doing on your phone right now? And then she switches over and she looks up skip lagging, which at the time was in the news because it was this thing where people are like skipping around trying to, what the airlines see is stealing money from them. And so, that it's like becoming this contentious thing that's in the court systems. And so she skip lagging websites trying to figure out how to like cheat the airline system. And then she switches over to Slack. And yes, am I being nosy? Yes, because at this point, I am totally pulled into her life, okay? Because I feel bad for the ride or die. Because he thinks he's having a real conversation. And I'm like, that girl just leveled up, man. She ain't paying attention to you. She just keeps saying things to you to like lodge these like little word missiles. And you keep responding, Mr. Ride or Die. And she keeps leveling up. And then, no joke, I was like, this is the part I'm being filmed. She switches over to Slack to have a conversation with her team about better telemarketing software. I was like, you are everything wrong with this country right now. And it's like, what is happening? Right? But the reality is that we get sucked into these crazy cycles. So as funny as it was for me watching this whole thing play out, the reality is that all of us find ourselves in those situations where we don't realize it at the moment, but then we walk away later, and we're like, what was I thinking? It starts off, what were they thinking? But eventually the reality punches you in the face, and you're like, what was I thinking? Why did I say that? Why did I do that? And this is what James understood. This is why Jesus, he had demonstrated in his teaching that there is a power to words and there's a power of how we live our lives that actually has an impact on others. And James is like, look, your words have so much weight to them. I just want you to recognize there are some situations, circumstances where you just need to wait before you say something. That there is an extra weight in contentious conflict conversations, and the best thing you can do because of that weight is to wait before you speak. I think James had a deeper understanding because he comes back to this idea of the mouth and the tongue later. And I think in some ways we saw this, again, illustrated. For many of us, you're probably like me, you were glued to the television a few weeks ago with what was playing out in Maui. Right? And this beautiful kind of paradise town was just, because of what I'm sure investigators will eventually figure out, was just a confluence and convergence of a series of really bad circumstances that created this wildfire that swept through and destroyed this town. And people were rushing into the waters to try to avoid it. And that it probably will take months before we know the final death count, and it'll take months before we know really, truly what was devastated and what was lost. And James, in that later portion of his letter, starts to talk about the tongue, and he comments on wildfires and how just a tiny spark can lead to these massive fires. And the earliest indication right now with investigators is that the high winds blowing through the town knocked over some power lines, and that those power lines sparked, hitting the dry brush that then caught on fire and started to sweep through. That started to move so fast that it could outrun cars. And with the 2-lane road that cut through this town, people eventually had to abandon cars and run into the water. Some of them spending hours and hours watching their village burn. This is why I think James was like, look, be slow to speak. Because what it does actually is it helps us slow to become angry. That if you wait on your words because you recognize the weight that they may have, you're quick to listen and understand and to stand under. You embody that Shema of like, I want to really understand what it is, where they're coming from. Then the downstream effect is that you do find yourself getting angry slower. And that can prevent this whole devastating wildfire that can play out. I mean, a lot of times for us, the moments we most regret are usually in those moments where we accelerated our responses and our reactions in conflict. We said something, we did something, and in the moment it felt right, it made sense, and then later we look back and we wish. This is why I know, like, if there was a way to have a time machine, we had already figured it out, because the weight of regret and remorse is so powerful that if there was a way to make a time machine, we would have done it for that reason alone. Because there are moments in our lives, your life and my life, where I wish there was a machine I could step in and undo those moments I really, really wish I could redo. And James is trying to prevent us from experiencing any of that devastation. He says, look, sometimes the words we say, when they get out of our mouths, they land, they hit, and there's consequences to them. And you can't undo them. You can't take them back. They've been said. And sometimes those words end up destroying relationships. Sometimes those words end up cutting through and creating years of distance between siblings. For some of us, it's words that we still carry with regret. And Jesus had a different picture for what the church would be. He wasn't just consumed. He didn't just step onto the cross and die and be placed in a grave so that we could avoid regret. He did it so that we could be a force of good and this beautiful picture of who he is on planet Earth. Which is why, I don't know if you saw this, but in the aftermath of what the aerial shots and surveys of Maui, there was this one picture that I was like, man, that's what it looks like to be a Christian. It was this picture. The first time I saw it, I thought it was like some kind of AI generation or Photoshop. But you see all the devastation, and then there's this one house. This house The owners of the house happened to be in Massachusetts while the wildfires were sweeping through their community. They were here hearing from friends and neighbors about what was happening there. This house was built in 1925, so it's almost 100 years old. And last year, they finished some renovations on the house that turned out changed it all. They had changed some structural things and had reordered some things in and around the house. And because of it, it ended up being the one house that remained and didn't burn down. And when Jesus invites us to follow him and to follow his way of living, again, it's not just so that we wouldn't burn down. It's because we're meant to be a beautiful picture to the world that there is a better way, that there is a life-giving way. We're meant to be that for our spouse and for our kids. I mean, Kirk Franklin, who some of you probably have heard of, right? I mean, has this one song way back in the day that just always haunted me. It was like I might be the only Jesus they see. Like I might be the only gospel they ever read. Like there's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then there's Chris. That I'm the fifth gospel for my family. I'm the fifth gospel for my kids. I'm the fifth gospel for the people who work with me. I'm the fifth gospel for the team of sixth grade girls that I coach in soccer. Like, I'm that. Long before they ever read those other ones, they're going to decide oftentimes if they're even interested in reading based on what they see in me. And this is what I believe you and I can be. But the reality is, being slow to anger is hard. It feels really right and good right now, but in the moment, all that wants to go out the window, and you tell that something what they need to hear. And that's why this is the first prerequisite message for the series I want to kind of map out for us the rest of September. It's this conversation around reactions and how they speak louder than words. And this is a series I'm super excited about. Yesterday, I'm not exaggerating, it probably saved me and my daughter's relationship for a moment there. Because I'd been spending time processing through this already, and we had a moment, and I fortunately did not just react without thought. And because everything in me wanted to hit the button and release the weapons. And I didn't. And it's because of what I want to teach you over the next 3 weeks and how you and I can start to look like that house, even if our past and those around us look like it's just been singed from warfare. Because I believe if you and I can be quick to listen, and we can learn the value and the strength of waiting on our words, then we can actually start to move into that life filled with better decisions and fewer regrets. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you. Thank you that you care about us, that you care about the reality of our lives, that Christianity was not just merely something that was about giving us fire insurance for the afterlife, but it was about showing us a way of life in this life. That it wasn't about merely just trying to get into heaven, but to be installers of heaven wherever we find ourselves on earth. And Jesus, I thank you for your brother and the words you inspired through him and the way that they can transform our lives when empowered by your Spirit. And I pray that even today, in the moments that we have left before we leave, that we would experience the weight of your words of love and grace. And that we would see that you're a God who is slow to anger, abounding in love. And it's in your name, Jesus, I pray. Amen. So today we want to close out with a song to really, because I think just to be very candid, even in the moment I was referring to yesterday, part of the weight of me with my children responding is that I realize that I follow a God, and we call him, I say God is my Father. And that oftentimes I am giving her and him the first glimpse of him. That I am the lowercase f, Father, who on my best days, I hope, is pointing her to a capital F Father, who will never let her down. And that's heavy. In the same way with mothers, right? I mean, like, there's just this weight. But I was thinking about this song that we're going to close out with today, that the reason it matters is because I want them to know about him and the love and the grace that he has, that he is a God who is ready to receive them. There is nothing that they can do, nothing that they will do. There is no thought they could have, no words they could speak, no deeds that they could do that could ever exhaust the love and the grace that he has for them. Doesn't mean he doesn't have expectations. It doesn't mean that there is not a way of life of following him and obeying him, but it means that even when we fail, he does not. And that for some of us, for that one moment where I didn't release the weapons, there are countless other moments where I did. And I'm sure in your own storyline, it's the same way for you too. And that for us, moving into this next conversation, out of this conversation, that I just want to leave the space open for some of us to do some work, heavy lifting internally, to say, God, I need to process the fact that I'm carrying around some regret. Regret in my marriage, regret in my parenting, regret in my workspace, regret in my home with my siblings, or in my school, around my lunch table, that for us just to be able to find that he is a God who's saying, hey, run to me, not away from me. I want to give you comfort. I want to give you hope. I want to give you life. And that's why we're closing out with the song today called Run to the Father. And it's a beautiful song, if you've never heard it, that just poetically puts into melody this notion of God's love. And so I want to invite you to stand as our team leads us to sing, and encourage for some of you maybe to actually not just singing the words, but to allow it to be the prayers that you say to him today. God, I am coming to you. My heart needs a surgeon. My soul needs rest. And thank you that I can find it in you, Jesus. Let's sing.
Run to the Father again and again and again. don't have a context for that kind of love. Don't understand, I can't comprehend. All I know is I need you. Run to the Father, fall into grace. Done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, 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 again and again and again and again. Oh, 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 your sight, longing for my first breath, running into your arms, running from life to death. I feel this rush deep in my chest. Your mercy is calling out. Just as I am, you pull me in, and I know I need you now. I run to the Father, fall into grace. Done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again. Run to the Father, fall into grace. Done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart found a surgeon, my soul found a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, 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 again and again and again and again. Oh, 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 again and again and again and again.
Thanks so much for joining us today. We hope that you found today's message helpful. Looking forward to starting the next series on being reactive, because I don't know about you, but that is my biggest struggle, is reacting too quickly, reacting too aggressively, overreacting, and everyone in the Darnell household said amen. Y'all be quiet. All right, also student ministry starts next week. Very excited to start with if you are in grades or you know someone in grades 6 through 12, we will start next week. Right after church, we will meet, food, fun, games. We're going to start a series on comparison, because we know that's something that we all struggle with, especially students deal with, comparing themselves to other people and what they have and what they can do. So we're going to start off with that. Look forward to that. If you have any questions about student ministry, student groups, see me right after the service. I'd love to talk to you about it. If you're new here and you haven't met Chris yet, he would love to meet you out in the lobby afterwards. He has stop by and see him. And we look forward to seeing you back next week as we start our new series, Reactions Speak Louder Than Words. Take care, God bless, and look forward to seeing you back next week.